Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be going through how to launch an RTO-CRICOS business. So it's all about what you need to know to get your organisation registered. Or if you are looking at purchasing an RTO-CRICOS organisation, we'll be going through what the process will be for that and what you need to know with regards to purchasing or setting up your own training organisations. This webinar came about because of the amount of questions that we get that are very similar about the training industry. So the reason why we've put it together is we've based it on the typical questions that we've received on setting up an RTO or purchasing a training organisation. So we'll be answering a lot of those typical questions today. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Angela Connell. I am the CEO of Vivacity Coaching and Consulting. I commenced in the training industry in 2003 as a training coordinator, and then I worked as a trainer and assessor delivering certificate to diploma in business. And I worked for a range of government and private sector training organisations. I've also worked as an RTO and CRICOS compliance auditor. I've worked as an RTO manager, compliance manager, and CEO within two training organisations that I've owned and operated. And I've owned and operated over 5 businesses in my lifetime. The coaching and consulting we've been doing since 2009, so Vivacity's been around we're celebrating 10 years this year. And during that time, we've attended over 300 audits, 200 ASCA audits, and we've also assisted with a range of initial registrations, re-registrations, additions to scope, complaints audits, tribunal hearings, a range of different areas. We also have ongoing membership packages where we look after our clients on an ongoing basis and managing their ongoing compliance. A lot of our services are around assisting our clients to gain a better understanding of how to implement a continuous improvement approach throughout their organisation. I've also written many policies and procedures against the standards for RTOs and also the national standards 2018, so for both RTOs and CRICOS. Prior to that, I had worked in a range of different industries writing policies and procedures against industrial relations legislation, as well as workplace health and safety regulations. So I've got a lot of experience with compliance with legislation. I've also worked with ISO standards as well and ISO accreditation with a number of organisations. So at Vivacity, we have a big team here. So there's a number of us here that work with a variety of clients. We have a caseload of clients for our team, variety of team members who are called client liaison officers. And we have over 200 clients around Australia in both RTO and CRICOS sector. Last count was about 250. It was over that amount. Okay, so you're thinking about getting into the training industry. So let's talk a little bit about what are the requirements and what is an RTO. So an RTO is a registered training organisation. It's where you can deliver nationally recognised training around Australia. That means that you've been registered with the government to be able to deliver training that is and issue certificates that are nationally recognised around Australia. Also overseas, there's a number of countries overseas that also recognise our qualifications. You can issue certificates that are recognised. You may have the ability to apply for government funding and traineeships. You have to be a registered training organisation in order to access government funding, and you need to have qualifications or training products that are on your scope that are going to meet skill shortages needs, really. That's basically where government funding comes about. And the purpose of registered training organisations is to meet industry requirements. So you've developed your training and assessment and have a strategy around it to deliver training that's going to meet an industry need or a range of industry needs. And the core component of that is you're actually engaging with industry to identify what their needs are, identify how what gaps are they having and how can you meet those gaps, and the best way to deliver that training to meet those industry needs. And that can include the resources that you need to deliver that training, the training and assessment tools, the equipment, the trainer assessor requirements. There's a lot of requirements that you need to comply with to be a registered training organisation, and that includes having policies, procedures, forms and documentation that meet the legislative requirements. It's also processes that you have in place for monitoring your students and ensuring that your assessment tools are validated and that the assessment tools meet the requirements of the training products. It's a lot of the responsibility around owning and operating a registered training organisation is about how are you going to look after those students and ensure that they're getting training and assessment that's going to meet industry needs, but also how they are meeting the needs of when they go into the workplace. So once they go into the workplace, how are they going to meet the employer's needs in the workplace? Okay, so that's a RTO. So CRICOS is the Commonwealth Register of Institutions and Courses for Overseas Students. So CRICOS is more around international students, and the major difference between CRICOS and RTOs and the legislation around those two areas is how are you going to look after the students and meet all the visa requirements. It's the main difference between domestic market and international market is visa conditions. So you can deliver, once you're registered as a CRICOS provider, you can deliver training to international students in Australia. If you wanted to deliver training overseas in another country, you just need to be registered as an RTO. You don't need to get CRICOS registration as well. CRICOS, as I stated earlier, is all about meeting visa condition requirements. So it's bringing students into Australia and looking after them while they're in Australia and ensuring that they're meeting their visa conditions. And part of your requirement is to monitor their academic and attendance performance and ensuring that they are attending the training minimum of 20 hours per week, unless you've got online training in there, which you can have up to 33% of the training can be delivered online, and then the remainder can be face-to-face. But it's also ensuring that they are completing the assessments. There are a lot of students overseas who think they pay for their course and then they arrive in Australia and then they pay for someone to do all their assessments, and they don't have to turn up, they just get their certificate, which is a big area where Border Protection and Patrol are monitoring and ensuring that these students are actually attending the training. So they're over here on a student visa, so they should be attending their training and completing their required assessment. So your role as a CRICOS provider is ensuring that they are attending and they are meeting the requirements of their visa and completing their training. With RTO, you can do your CRICOS registration with an RTO registration. So that means you can deliver nationally recognised qualifications, or it might be that you want to deliver ELICOS courses, which is English language courses for students who are coming from overseas into Australia, or you could do a combination of both. So you could do nationally recognised qualifications, certificates, and your ELICOS together, ELICOS alone or RTO alone. So it's up to you how you want to set that up. The provider is responsible for reporting student attendance and academic monitoring to the Department of Human Affairs and Border Protection. So that's the main role with CRICOS. It's maintaining how are you providing sufficient support services to your students whilst they're in Australia. And that includes living in Australia, how are you helping them to adjust to the culture within Australia, being their support person for when they need assistance with getting a doctor or medical services, or it could be finding a place to live, counselling or support services. There's a range of different services that a CRICOS provider would need to do that would be more than what you would need to do for a domestic market. So who is the regulatory body for our industry? The Australian Skills Quality Authority, ASQA, are the authority for registered training organisations and CRICOS, so they're the regulatory body. So they've got strict requirements where they've got to regulate the legislation. So basically, it's like when you look at what police officers' roles are, they regulate the legislation around civil, all sorts of things, speeding and driving regulations, and there's also fraud and um, all sorts of different other legislation, whereas ASQA is very specific around the standards for RTOs and the Australian Quality Framework and compliance with fit and proper person requirements and financial viability risk assessments as well. And then with CRICOS, you've got ELICOS and you've got the ESOS Act that they are regulating as well. They have strict requirements for submitting your application. So it's not just a matter of buying your license. We often get people who contact us who think they could just buy a license from the government. There is a lot involved when you are registering a training organisation. You've got to demonstrate that you're a fit and proper person to be able to run this training organisation, but you've also got to demonstrate that you have the financial resources and the business planning structure and strategies in place in order to keep the business going and moving forward. You've also got to be able to demonstrate that you have training and assessment strategies that are going to meet the training product requirements, and that includes your trainers, assessors, assessment tools, equipment, facilities, whether you've got room hire or whether you've got your own building. There's a lot of requirements that you need to demonstrate. And what we've noticed in the last 8-9 months since the 1st of July 2018, it has been a lot tougher, and even the auditors are stating that it's much harder for them to actually approve training organisation. There's a lot more stricter requirements with the regulatory requirements, and there's been hardly any RTOs that have been approved since the 1st of July, and that's because they're getting really, really tough, and you really must be able to demonstrate that you have sufficient resources in place to be able to deliver quality education. So ASQA is responsible for auditing your organisation prior to gaining registration. So though it'll be a process where you need to send documents to them to review prior to coming out to a site audit. That's if you do get a site audit. We're seeing that not all initial registrations are getting a site audit. A lot of them, they're doing a desk audit, and then if you don't meet the requirements of the desk audit, then they will reject your application, and then you won't be able to go any further. You'll get an authorised auditor from ASQA who will be responsible for auditing your organisation, and they audit your organisation against the legislative requirements. So if it's the standards for RTOs or the CRICOS National Code. To find out more, you can go to www.asqa.gov.au. So as I stated earlier, ASQA is increasing scrutiny on new applications for registration, and it has had a massive impact on our industry. There are massive changes to the submission requirements. So it used to be that you could just submit your application form with your CEO stat deck and your fit and proper person forms, and then you could submit all of your other documents down the track. And that in the early days, it was 2 to 3 months later. Now it could be 9 months, although they're asking for more. These are people who registered before the 30th of June, whereas now you have to submit all of these documents prior to your submission, and you need to undertake a self-assessment to identify that you've met all the requirements, of which this self-assessment can be completed by consultants such as Vivacity, where we could go in and we conduct an audit of your training organisation application or part of our Kickstart package, we include it as doing a self-assessment to identify that you've got everything in place prior to submitting your application. And that's not just your standard forms, being your fit and proper person, financial viability requirements, and your CEO stack deck. There's things like you've got to have all of your training and assessment strategies in place and submit at your at the submission stage. So prior to being able to submit anything to ASQA, any application whatsoever, you've got to have everything ready. You've got to have the building in place. You've got to have the training rooms in place. All the resources need to be in place. Trainers and assessors need to be in place. And all of the equipment that you need to be able to deliver that training. And you need to have every single assessment tool in place for every single unit of competency for each training product that you are placing on your scope of registration. So it's been massive. They haven't had very many applications since the 1st of July because of this new process. There's a lot more requirements. It is becoming a barrier to entry into the market because it is much tougher for people to put an application in. I was just saying the other day, I don't know how anybody tries to do this on their own because it is so tough. And we've got over 20 years of experience in the training industry and in particular in compliance. And we're having clients who are coming to us who are struggling with their assessment tools and struggling with, and in particular, these are ones that we submitted before the midway point last year and are now going to audit. And it is so much tougher to get through. So we've really contextualised how we service our clients now because we want 100% success rate. So we're really identified within our Kickstart package how we can support you as an applicant through the whole process. And part of it is doing that self-assessment application, but also it's coming out and validating your assessment tools. It's meeting with your team and identifying that you do have all of the equipment in place. It's ensuring that your trainers and assessors do hold the relevant skills and qualifications. And it's really getting into your assessment tools and contextualizing them right down to your learner cohort and ensuring that they're going to meet the needs of your industry consultation that you've undertaken. So it's a much tougher market to go through, and there's a lot more requirements, and which is the reason why we've now had to expand our Kickstart package so that it provides a lot more services, because you're going to need it just to get through this process. So there's been increased scrutiny on multiple owners. So you would see out on the market, there are owners out there just trying to sell what are known as clean skin RTOs. So they're RTOs that have never been operated, and they've set them up with the purpose of selling. And the problem is with doing that, there are a lot of risks around buying an RTO. And we've seen a few cases where people have bought an RTO, started operating it, had their first audit, and then lost their RTO. So they got the registration cancelled. So it is very, very tough. You really need to make sure that you have the genuine intent and capacity to be able to provide that quality education. And you need to have a really good understanding of the qualifications that you're placing onto your scope of registration, and that those qualifications are going to meet an industry need. And that you really ensure that you've got all of those resources in place and that you've engaged with the industry and made sure that your training and assessment is going to meet those industry needs. So it's, quite tough. Anyway, so to find out more, I have a couple of articles there on our website that you can check out. But I'm also going to tell you a bit more about what the process is and what our packages do. So before I continue with that, I am going to play a video, and this one comes from the ASQA website. So this is a video that's been provided by ASQA to explain what ASQA is all about and what are their requirements are, and that they are the national regulator. They actually distributed this video because there was a lot of issues out there with people not understanding what ASQA's position was in registering training organisations. So on the 1st of July 2018, applications for new initial registrations have come under additional scrutiny. And if you're applying to become a registered training organisation, they want to make sure that you are ready to commence your delivery. You actually understand what you need to have in place. You have all of the resources in place. You have the so you need to complete a self-assessment and make sure that you meet all the compliance requirements. They'll also undertake a review of your strategic business plan and financial forecast to identify that you've met the financial viability requirements. You need to demonstrate that you've got sufficient funds in your bank account, but you're also able to access funds to operate your business over the next 3 years. You have sufficient staff within your organisation to operate that training organisation, and that they're of good character and good faith, and that they've met the requirements of the fit and proper person requirements. Once you've submitted all your application, ASQA will undertake a comprehensive series of checks, including going through your financial viability, working with children, looking at the people who are working within your organisation and that they're meeting all the requirements. If at any time you provide any evidence that demonstrates that you won't be able to provide quality education, your application will be rejected. If you do successfully meet all the requirements and are granted registration, they will continue to scrutinise your organisation for the first 2 years of registration to make sure that you actually meet all of the requirements and that you're managing your ongoing compliance. So you only get registration for 2 years, and then following that 2 years, you'll undertake another audit, and at that audit, they'll identify whether you'll be able to get another 5 years registration. And you'll only be able to get that additional registration is if you're able to demonstrate that you're delivering quality education. The purpose of all this is to protect students and to protect all training in the Australian sector, and that only top quality providers are registered training organisations. This is to protect the valuable image of Australia and the Australian education that we provide across Australia. Okay, so you can access that video also on YouTube and on the ASQA website, but that's basically the short of it, what you need to know about the ASQA process. So the process for applying for registration with ASQA, these some really important parts that you need to know. The process is quite extensive. ASQA are determining your capacity to be able to deliver quality education. You need to ensure that you are ready to commence training with all of the required resources at the time of submitting your application to ASQA. So that includes your policies and procedures, your documentation, that you have documentation in place that's going to meet the requirements of your policies and procedures. So that can include complaints and appeals, refund policies and procedures, credit transfers, RPL, recognition of prior learning applications. You have an enrolment agreement form, that you have all of those documentation, and we have over 80 documentation with our policies and procedures for running that training organisation and manage that ongoing compliance. There cannot be any changes to your submission once you've submitted, so that includes you can't change the location or your trainers and assessors or the training products that you wish to have on your scope of registration. Now, what we're experiencing is you could submit your application. We had a client who submitted their application within a week of commencing with us. That's not our average. Our average is 2 months. The reason why we went so quickly is because we were trying to get in before the changes on the 1st of July, and they're just going to audit 9 months later. now. So it's taken quite a bit of, and that was all ASQA's process. So ASQA at the moment has slowed down the process, but I think it's the backlog of work that they've got at the moment, and that's what's affected the amount of applications that they're processing at the moment. And what I predict is it will go back to what it used to be, which was 2 to 3 months. You'll go to audit from your submission. But yeah, there's major changes with what you need to submit. So when you're applying for initial registration, you need to demonstrate your financial viability. So you need to demonstrate that you have sufficient funds in place to be able to fund your training organisation over the next 3 years, and you need to do your projections of 3 years of financial projections. And that should be based on the qualifications or the training products that you're placing on your scope of registration, what your typical expenses would be, what income you would get from those training products on your scope of registration. Then you also need to provide a strategic business plan to identify what growth, if there's any growth of the training organisation, how and when will you recruit staff members based on that growth. Would you put on other qualifications later on down the track? Is your plan to expand the premises into bigger premises? So this all needs to be demonstrated through your strategic business plan and through your financial viability. Then you need to complete a self-assessment of your capacity to become a registered training organisation. So this is a form that ASQA actually provide, and it's like an internal audit of your organisation where they review you're undertaking an audit of all of the documentation that you're going to submit, and then ASQA will review that prior to coming out and doing any, if they happen to do a site audit. So for RTO registration, you need to comply with the Vocational Education and Training Quality Framework, also known as the VET framework. And these include the standards for RTOs, the Australian Qualifications Framework, fit and proper person requirements, financial viability, risk assessment, and data provision requirements. For CRICOS registration is you need to meet the requirements of the Education Services for Overseas Students Act, so it's the ESOS Act, and associated legislation from the ESOS framework. So this legal framework includes the ESOS Act, ESOS regulations, and then you also have the National Code for Training Providers to Overseas Students 2018. So there are a range of different forms that you need to submit with your application to ASQA. So each person in your organisation who is in a senior management position, listed as a director or a shareholder who holds more than 15% of the shares, must sign a fit and proper person form, and that needs to be submitted with your application. So that fit and proper person form is to determine your background. Have you owned and operated an RTO or training organisation before? If so, was there any issues with it? Have you had any family members, so mother, father, brother, sister, cousins, even de facto relationships where they've owned and operated a training organisation? You've got to declare that. It doesn't mean that you're going to be rejected, but you need to declare it, and it will be part of their determination on whether you are a fit and proper person based on what those other training organisations have done in the past. The fit and proper person is also checking for fraudulent behaviour or anything that may affect a training organisation and the safety of those students that you'd have within your training organisation. So there's a lot more scrutiny with fit and proper person requirements than there was in the past. The CEO of the organisation, which is generally one of the directors of the training organisation, but it doesn't have to be. It can be someone that you've hired and you've elected to be the CEO. The CEO may or may not have any experience in the training industry at all, but part of the requirements is that they've got to declare that they are responsible for all of the compliance in the training organisation. So if there's any non-compliances, they've signed a stat dec to say that they are responsible for all the compliance requirements. You'll need to complete a financial viability kit, which is where you demonstrate how you will meet the capacity to deliver training and assessment. So these are your projected profit and loss and your balance sheet projections into the future, and what capacity will you have to be able to provide ongoing education and support services for your students. You need to complete a completed self-assessment tool which demonstrates your preparedness for registration, which is very similar to conducting an internal audit of your organisation to determine that you have everything ready and you have everything in place. So other documentation that you need to submit is a strategic business plan, which identifies what your strategies will be over the next 3 years on your business, your projected profit and loss, training and assessment strategies for each training product that you wish to place onto your scope of registration. And within these training and assessment strategies, it is detailed how you're going to deliver your training, why are you delivering it the way you are, what industry consultation you've undertaken, who are your typical learner cohort, how are you meeting those learner cohort needs, how have you adjusted this training to meet those learner cohort needs, and then identifying the units of competencies that you'll be delivering, the assessment tools and the resources that you'll be using, and it's basically your business plan for your training and assessment. That's basically what a training and assessment strategy is. You also need to submit your training and assessment tools, and you'll have a range of those. So it should be for every single unit of competency that you're going to place on your registration, and they will be audited as well. Staff matrix for your trainer and assessor, which includes their industry knowledge and background and how that's relevant to the units of competencies that they're going to be delivering. They need to be holding a minimum of certificate 4 in training and assessment. TAE 40116 is the current one. They also need to demonstrate that they held the relevant qualifications and or experience to deliver the training to meet the unit of competency requirements. We also need to submit your policies and procedures manual that meets the requirements of the legislation, so being the standards for RTOs or CRICOS, and all of your marketing material for each training product that you wish to place on your scope of registration. Additional requirements for CRICOS is you need 9B building approval. So you need to make sure that you get your building approved by the council for the delivery of education services. So there are a range of different, 9B is the main one, but there are a range of different building approvals that you can get in various states around Australia. So you'll need to go to your local council to find out what the building approval requirements are for delivering education services on your site or the proposed site. So we highly recommend, if you haven't got a building yet, that you go out and go source a building and that you get 9B approval for that building as soon as possible. Now, we are seeing that there is changes coming into place for domestic market as well, where you need to have your training facilities needs to meet education purposes, and it's got to the stage where it's you basically need 9B building approval for that as well. So it needs to have on your lease or approval from your council that the facilities meet education purposes or fit for training purposes, and that will be dependent on the qualifications that you've got on your scope of registration as well, and what you're delivering and how you're going to be delivering it. You need to also provide a floor plan of the building with your exit doors, where your lifts are, where the stairwell is, how you've structured the rooms, how many tables are you going to fit in each room, ensuring that you have a metre squared per international student and 1.5 metre square per ALACOS student. So that's the space requirements for students within a classroom. So that's just within the classroom, never mind your hallways and your lunchrooms and things like that. You need to have those floor plans in place. You need to have a CRICOS timetable which demonstrates that all of the training products on your scope of registration, when you're going to deliver it, who's going to deliver it, what sessions do you have, what training rooms do you have, and it's a timetable that will cover all of those. An international student prospectus, which is the prospectus that you'll distribute to your students prior to, which is marketing for your training organisation, and it includes all of the students' rights and responsibilities within that student prospectus as well. Your letter of offer, so which is the letter that you send out to your students prior to course commencement, which is offering them the training and what will they get within their training. Student support services officer, you need to have a student support services officer available 24/7 at your facility, and that may be a range of support officers that you need to have in place at your organisation depending on the size and scope of your operations. If you're going to put ELICOS on your scope of registration, you need to have an academic manager in place, and that academic manager should have some sort of counselling background as well, or background with working with international students for non-English speaking background where they're learning an English language skill. So they're the additional requirements for CRICOS. So you might be asking, well, should I become an RTO or expand into CRICOS? Because this sounds really scary and there's a lot of work that's involved. Well, this will depend on what you are currently doing. What's your current circumstances? Are you in business now? Do you need a training background to get into the training industry? No, but you do need to make sure that you have sufficient trainers and assessors that hold the relevant qualifications and have a minimum of 3 years industry experience within the last 3 years. And if you own a business right now, it might be that you want to set that business up to be able to now offer training services. So we get a lot of people come to us who are consulting company who now want to change over the consulting company to deliver nationally recognised training. So that may be in the past that they were delivering non-accredited training and now they wanted to deliver accredited training. We also get a lot of training providers who are out there who might be delivering under the scope of registration of another training organisation. So they're delivering training that meets the needs of another RTO. They're delivering under that scope of registration using their training products on that scope of registration. It could be that they're paying them a commission for each certificate that they issue, or it could be that they're working with the RTO where the RTO is recruiting the students. So that one works really well where you're working under a partnership arrangement and then decide to set up as your own organisation. As I said before, you might be delivering non-accredited training and now want to deliver accredited training that is nationally recognised, and it might be a requirement of your industry that the people who work in your industry sector require a nationally recognised qualification. So they need to have a licence or a certification that meets the requirements of that industry sector. Do you have access to an international market? So I wouldn't be applying for CRICOS registration unless you did have access to an international market and that you are meeting the requirements, being like, for example, that you're able to bring those students into Australia, you already have a pathway, you already have in place some education agents that you could work with for recruiting students into your training organisation. Buying versus registering your own RTO or CRICOS business. So we get asked this a lot, should I buy or should I start up my own? Now, a lot of people think, well, and at the moment, it can take a lot longer to register a training organisation, but you could also put yourself at risk of buying a RTO and then that RTO being non-compliant. So I've got an example of where this has happened recently. We've got a client who came to us. They had bought an RTO. The RTO was up for re-registration. They went to audit for that re-registration and were found non-compliant. They came to us following that and asked us to assist them with the rectifications. So we assisted with the rectifications and then they were deemed still not compliant with their risk of their registration being cancelled. With that registration being cancelled, that was due to their training and assessment tools and their trainer and assessor qualifications. Their registration, they're in tribunal now, so they've actually got to the stage of going to tribunal, whereby that their registration is going to be cancelled, looks like it's going to be cancelled, and we've put a stay of decision in at the moment because what happened was when they went to reconsideration, submitted further documents, it was identified, the auditors picked up other non-compliances that weren't identified in the first audit response. It's not fair and equitable the way I'm seeing it at the moment, but that was some of the issues. One of the big things that we know that ASCA are doing is they're targeting people who are buying training organisations and think they're going to escape this whole process of going through an audit and identifying whether they actually are going to meet the requirements. Now, the big thing with buying, like this guy who bought the RTO, it had a training product on its scope of registration that he knew nothing about. He also knew nothing about the training industry. So he tried to do this all on his own. He had the previous owner stay on as a trainer and assessor, but the previous owner just wiped his hands of the compliance and didn't want to have anything to do with it. So he really was stuck and didn't have a lot of assistance at all. It wasn't like if he engaged us earlier when he first bought the RTO, we could have prepared him for an audit. We could have taught him what he needed to do. I remember when he came along to the first workshop with me and he said, "Oh my God, Angela, I wish I'd learned about you before I bought this RTO because I would have learned so much more before getting into this, my first audit and trying to do this on my own." He just said it was so difficult because he really didn't understand what were the compliance requirements and how to meet those requirements. He thought it'd be okay because he had the previous owner there. But the thing is, the landscape's changed so much now, and with ASCA as the regulatory body, there's so many different things that are in place now that weren't there before. And because of his lack of understanding of how a training organisation should be operated, he really didn't know how to meet the compliance requirements. So there's a big risk of buying an RTO. Just because you buy it doesn't mean that you've bought an investment that's going to keep going. Like, you really need to, if you're going to buy an RTO, you need the previous staff members to stay on. You need an operations manager in there. You need someone who knows the qualifications. You really need to buy the organisation with everything in place already, and they have good compliance requirements already in there. Because as soon as you are registered as the new CEO or there's new directors of the training organisation, ASCA will target you as a risk and identify that you will need to be audited as the new CEO of the RTO. So it's a very high risk buying a training organisation. Because it doesn't matter even when they're re-registered you, because the re-registration is not going to affect the fact that you will be ranked as high risk because you've bought an RTO. And what they want to do is determine, well, you've bought this RTO, do you know how to run it? Do you know how to meet all the compliance requirements? Do you have an understanding of how this training should be delivered and assessed? And do you have your training and assessment strategies? Do you have all your documentation in place? So there's so many risks involved with buying it. And even though you think it's going to be quicker, it's still, you could spend all this money on the training organisation, go to audit, and then lose everything. And then you spent all this money in the business. So it can be a huge risk that way. It is a very good option if there is a lot of goodwill, if you can get the staff members with it, it's got all the resources there and in place, and it's a good quality training organisation, but you're going to be paying a lot more money for a training organisation like that. So any of these RTOs that you're looking at that are anywhere under the price of $200,000, they're your risky ones. You're even looking at more like the $800 million mark, $800,000 mark for a good quality training organisation, because they're the ones that are going to have the staff members already there and have everything in place. So that's your risk with buying. With registering your own, it's a different process because you're learning a lot along the way. I'd highly, highly recommend that the only time that you register your own training organisation is if you know your industry really well. So that's the qualifications that you're going to be delivering. For example, if you're going to go into childcare, you already have experience in the childcare industry, you have connections in the childcare industry, you already know there's some childcare centres where the students can do work placement, you've been doing consultation with them and identified a need need for training in that area, and you need to be really good at it. You need to know your industry really well. You don't necessarily need to know the training industry or understand the compliance requirements, but you need to know your training industry your industry really well. You could hire someone. I highly recommend that you have either an operations manager or a CEO or an RTO manager, or you hire someone like Vivacity to teach you how to manage all your compliance requirements. There will be a lot more work up front that you need to do to get set up. But you really do need to have an expert on your side on the compliance side. If you do not know anything about compliance and you do not understand anything about the training industry, you need to have someone on your team who does, and they have a good understanding of what you need to have in place in order to run a compliant and quality training organisation. The great thing about registering your own training organisation is you get to choose what quals you put on your scope, and you'll be audited on those quals and not on qualifications that are not relevant to you, and they may have been ones that you purchased with your RTO. So that's the pros and cons of buying versus setting up your own training organisation. So when you are looking at setting up a business in the training industry, you need to begin with the end in mind. So you may already have a company that's set up, or you may want to set up a new entity. RTOs can be registered under a range of structures, but from our experience, the best structure is a proprietary limited structure. So the ideal company structure, if you have other companies in place, that the other companies are registered under a trust. So you register your RTO as a standalone proprietary limited, and you can move it later under a trust. So you can set up that RTO and then move that later under a trust. But I wouldn't recommend that you put those companies in the same registration as the RTO unless you intend to sell those companies with the RTO. Because when you sell an RTO, it's a sale of shares and you sell the whole business. So it's not just part of the business that you sell. You've got to sell the whole business with the sale of shares. So it's quite a process there. So begin with the end in mind, where you want to be when you want to sell it later on down the track. So who should you have in your RTO? Well, we've helped many clients who were me, myself, and I RTOs in the past. Don't know whether I'd recommend that anymore. I think you need more people on your team. You need to be able to demonstrate to ASQA that you have sufficient resources in place to be able to support your students throughout their training. You don't need to have a team to set up an RTO, but we do highly recommend that you have experts with a range of experience to help you through the process. So with CRICOS, you need an academic manager and student support officer to meet the requirements of the capacity of the students you wish to apply for. You need to have trainers and assessors in place who have a minimum of 3 years industry experience within the last 3 years. They hold their Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, TAE 40116, and they also have the relevant qualification or industry experience within the industry sector that they're going to be delivering training in. And I highly recommend that this trainer assessor is also at your audit and that they have a thorough understanding of your assessment tools and how they work. So how long does it take? Well, according to ASQA, it can be anywhere between 12 to 18 months. Our process for RTO is to submit you to ASQA within 3 to 4 months. And then ASQA at the moment are taking anywhere between 6, 9, 12 months. So it can be anywhere between 6 to 12 months, depending on what you've got in your scope of registration. I do see this changing. I do see it will get quicker because, as I said, there hasn't been a lot of applications that have been submitted since the 1st of July, whereas there were, I did hear the stats recently, in the week leading up to the end of June last year, they had something like 35 applications or something like that. I know we had 9 applications in that month, so they had a lot of applications that they were trying to process through. Our process for CRICOS is to submit within 4 to 5 months. It takes a bit longer because you've got to get your 9B approval for your building. There's a few more requirements if you're going to be putting ELICOS on. ELICOS takes a bit longer again because you've got to get the course written to meet the requirements of your learner cohort, your industry sector. The timeframe to submit will be dependent on your current workload and any other commitments that you may have. So you need, as part of our contract when you're working with us, is you need a minimum of to dedicate a minimum of 10 hours per week towards this project as a minimum. If you're going to do this on your own, it would be even longer. It's quite a commitment. If you're writing policies and procedures alone, that can take 6 months just to write policies and procedures, never mind doing everything else that you need to have in place, because there's a lot of documentation required, but there's also that industry consultation and making sure that you contextualise your training and assessment strategies. So do you need to be an expert? You will need to have a good understanding of your organisation and your industry before going to audit. You'll need to have policies and procedures and documentation that support the government requirement or legislative requirements. Even better is if they've been through audit before. We recommend that you hire qualified and experienced trainers who have a minimum of 3 years industry experience. And you need CEO and directors don't need to have any training experience in the training industry, but if you are applying for CRICOS, you'll need to provide evidence that you have a principal executive officer who has a minimum of 5 years work experience in Australia. I do recommend, as I said earlier, that you need to be either an expert in your industry or a compliance expert to get through the requirements to get you through audit, and you'll need to have a good understanding of how to interpret that legislation, or have someone working with you who knows how to, like Vivacity, who knows how to interpret that legislation and assist you throughout the whole process. So here is an estimated startup fees. We get asked this a lot. Well, how much will it cost me to set up as a training organisation? So yeah, ASQA fees alone for an RTO are $8,800, and for CRICOS it's $9,900. With your registration and setup, you need about $30,000 to $40,000 for an RTO and $45,000 to $55,000 for CRICOS. And this will depend on what you put on your scope of registration and what other additional requirements that you need. You need to make sure you've got training and assessment tools in place, and those training and assessment tools can be anywhere between $1,000 per unit to $15,000 per unit, depending on what assessment tools need to be developed and what training products you're putting onto your scope of registration. You need to have a database, and you may want an online platform for your delivery of online learning, and that can be anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 or up to $20,000 depending on what you want for your online platform. For your training rooms, you'll need to, depending on your size and scope and where you're going to operate, whether you're in a city or whether you're going to be out further in the suburbs, or whether you're looking at regional areas. So that can be anywhere between $4,000 to $8,000. CRICOS tends to be more because you need to be near public transport, and you need to be in central hubs near accommodation where students will be living. So you're looking at $5,000 to $35,000. And that's per month in rent. That's per month, so not just over a year. For staff, you need, for an RTO, $700 to $4,000 per week, and that just depends on whether you're hiring a trainer or assessor or hiring other administration staff, or whether you're going to be doing that yourself. For CRICOS, $1,000 to $10,000, and that is because you need to have an academic manager and those student support officers and things like that in place. We have seen a lot of our clients who set up as an RTO or CRICOS provider, and a lot of their staff members are friends and family. So, and they're doing it, like particularly for that initial registration stage, is they're just they're doing another job while they're positioning themselves within your organisation as part of your registration. So for an RTO, you're going to need a minimum of $75,000, and for CRICOS, you're going to need a minimum of $100,000. Minimum, that is, for setting up. So where others fail, there's limited to no understanding of what to expect at audit. And we're seeing that time and time again where people have tried to do it on their own and then they end up coming to us and they really don't understand how strict and stringent it is right now and what are the requirements to get through audit, and their understanding of, what is this process and how do I respond, and what happens in the case of an auditor asks me this question. And they really are like, I've seen it, it's like they're rabbits in a spotlight. They really don't understand what this whole process is for an ASC audit. And an ASC audit is so different from a financial audit, even though that can be pretty scary as well. Training and assessment strategies are insufficient. They don't actually strategize what you are planning to do. How are you delivering your training and assessment? Who are your learner cohort? How are you going to deliver it to meet your industry needs? Have you undertaken industry consultation? It's the most important document in your organization is your training and assessment strategy, and where so many people get it wrong. Delivery and assessment plans are in place, but they do not meet or demonstrate the capacity to be able to deliver the training. So your delivery and assessment plan sets out how are you going to deliver that training, when are you going to deliver it, what units are you going to deliver, what resources do you need, what will the student be required to do in the classroom, what the student required to do outside of the classroom. It needs to be a really clear plan on how you're going to be delivering your training. Trainers and assessors do not have sufficient skills and knowledge or qualifications in their industry sector. Assessment tools do not meet the training product requirements, and they haven't been contextualized to meet your student needs. And they have even though there's a lot of assessment tools out there that have been written over years and years and years, a lot of them are still being deemed not yet compliant or not compliant because they haven't been contextualized to meet your learner cohort needs. Do not have the capacity to deliver what they included in their financial viability or their business plan. They don't have policies and procedures that demonstrate how they will meet the compliance requirements, and there's no supporting documents are in place, and the training facilities don't meet the training product requirements. So the risks of setting up without expertise, and we're seeing this where people have done this, they've tried to do it on their own and failed, lose money, missing the crucial documents at audit. Like it's pretty, like you need to really understand how to respond to ASQA and what are the requirements for these documents. And you could just miss one crucial document and that's it. It stuffs up your whole application. Not being properly prepared for audit, wasting a whole heap of time, being stressed financially and emotionally, getting overwhelmed with the ASQA requirements, end up with a sanction being imposed on your training organisation. So what if you are non-compliant? ASQA provides an ASQA audit report following the audit. They no longer have a rectification process. You now need to go to reconsideration, and you've got to get it right the first time. So if you haven't got all the sufficient and required documentation submitted in your initial application, you're going to get rejected. So you need to make sure that you have a very stringent process for undertaking that self-assessment to identify that you've actually got all of the required documentation in place prior to submission. If a minor risk, you will have until your re-registration to fix and provide evidence at your 2-year audit. If it's a critical risk, your application will be rejected and you will be given the option to apply again. So that's a whole initial registration application again. So do you have any questions? If you don't, please stay on the line. We will be going through a whole heap of questions about Vivacity and how we can assist you with the Kickstart and Kickstart your RTO and CRICOS package. So it looks like we don't have any questions, so I'll move forward onto the Kickstart package. So what do we do? And how do we help you get it right the first time? So what we do that's different, we coach, not just consult. We teach you how to do it. We implement a continuous improvement approach throughout your organization. We're going to be hard on you. We will be so hard on you because it's better that we're hard on you than ASQA be hard on you. We're going to make it tough and we're going to make sure you get through, because that is our goal, is to get you through. So we're going to kick your butt and make sure that you are running a successful training organization that's going to meet all of the compliance requirements. From delivery of monthly webinars that are delivered by me and face-to-face training that we deliver around Australia, we'll be teaching you how to implement a continuous improvement approach throughout your organization. You need to be serious about this. If you really want to set up as a registered training organisation, you need to be serious and you need to learn what you need to do. You need to ensure that you have a good understanding of the compliance requirements and you have the willingness to do it and get in there and do the work to achieve the requirements, because when you go to audit, it's not your consultant that is audited, it is you. And if you are non-compliant, it's not your consultant that's going to stick around and do everything and fix everything for you and pick up the pieces. It's you that needs to do that. So you need to go with someone who's going to teach you how to do this and do it right the first time and follow their instructions. As you can hear, I've got many years of experience in the training industry and over 30 years, and I have a lot of experience when it comes to the compliance requirements. As I said, we've done over 200 ASQA audits over the last 5 years. I have extensive experience in writing policies and procedures and other supporting documents based on our RTO and CRICOS experience. So you are gaining from our experience. We have a very systematic approach for setting up your training organisation and looking at from a business perspective and how you're going to run this training organisation as a business, not just meeting the compliance requirements and those ongoing needs that you're going to have. So when we work with our clients, we provide you with training and expert support. So you'll get a dedicated client liaison officer who will work with you, who will call you on a weekly basis to keep you on track with your package to make sure that we're getting you through the stages to submission to ASQA and then through to your audit. There will be monthly webinars on how to implement the policies and procedures and maintain your ongoing compliance. And we have a online portal that you can access previous webinars and where you can learn more about managing the compliance within your training organisation. We prepare you for your ASQA audit with a focus on managing your risk of the new business. We have an online system to access all your branded documents called Unicorn, where they're all branded to your organisation. There will not be a mistake on our documentation where you'll have someone else's name or contact details within your document, because they're specifically branded for your organisation with our system. So about our team. We have over 30 years of experience in the training industry and have attended over 200 ASQA audits. We are experienced auditors in both RTO and CRICOS compliance, and we've been writing policies and procedures for over 20 years. We also have a team of experienced trainers and assessors who have a lot of experience with writing training and assessment strategies, delivery and assessment plans, delivery of training, conducting assessment. We have hands-on experience working within RTOs and CRICOS organisations, and our team are trained by experienced auditors. Our Kickstart package requires no experience within the training industry. What you will get, a systematic approach to gaining your registration. You'll get a user's guide on how to run your RTO or CRICOS business, which is our policies and procedures. You'll have an industry recognised leader on your side with Vivacity. We've been around for 10 years now, and we've got extensive experience in not only managing continuous improvement and compliance, but we've also worked in the training sector. I've got over 20 years of experience personally working within RTOs and managing compliance and delivering training and assessment. You'll have expertise in the industry to get you through quicker. We can get you started straight away, no need to wait. We'll set you realistic goals. We will be honest with you with the process. We will not lie to you. We will not tell you that you can get registered within 3 months, because that is not going to happen. We will not say that it's an easy process. It is not an easy process. It is tough. There are not very many people getting through with their registration. We want all of our clients to get through, and we'll fight hard for you to get your registration. You cannot go into this half-hearted, and you need to select the right consultant to work with you who understands what they're doing and they understand what the process is. We'll get you started with our dream team, with experienced experts on your side who are connected within the industry. You'll be fully supported with training, with both face-to-face and online training, with systems and practices that have been through many ASQA audits before. We have hands-on experience with ASQA audits as well as running training organisations. You won't get one person, you'll get a whole team on your side. We even have a support desk that will support you throughout the whole process. And as I said earlier, you'll get a dedicated client liaison officer who will work with you throughout the whole process. There are some consultants out there who are just one-on-one consultants, and they don't, if they're not available, if they're in an audit, you cannot contact them. You'll always find someone that you'll be able to contact at Vivacity. Building your dream. We are not building you a business for now. We are building you an investment for the future. We have the expertise, the experience, and the tools to help you achieve your goals now. We have a lot of connections within the training industry that we can refer you to, building services, ELICOS courses, training resources. There's a whole range of support services that we're able to recommend to you because we've tried and tested them. You might feel that you're close now to get started as you're registered, get your training organisation up and going. But how close are you? Do you really know? You won't know until you have some expertise by your side who know what they're doing and they're able to guide you throughout the whole process. So what's in the Kickstart package? You'll get a dedicated client liaison officer who will assist you throughout the whole process. They'll assist you with the documentation, your financial viability, or answering your compliance questions, dealing with ASQA on your behalf, completing your application online, guiding you with all of the documentation that needs to be completed. You'll get a strategic business plan template and training on how to complete that and how to complete your financial viability. You'll get the training and assessment strategy template, which will be drafted by your client liaison officer, who will then include all of the relevant information that you need to know to meet the requirements of industry sector. You'll get assistance with your financial viability risk assessment. We include the accountant as part of our fees. So our fees are a bit higher because it includes the accountant's requirements, and there are a lot more involved with financial viability. It's not just getting a document signed off. You've actually got to meet a requirement with your strategic business plan and your financial viability risk assessment. We'll assist you with the ASQA application. We'll conduct a self-assessment mock audit at your premises, and we'll be by your side at your ASQA audit. You'll get included with your Kickstart a 12-month membership into our Vivacity membership program. So you could go for gold, ruby, or diamond, and this will depend on the level of service that you need. So our gold level is our very basic, so you'll get all the documentation, monthly webinars, workshops, and an annual systems check. With Ruby, you get all of the above, plus 2 assessment validation sessions, plus 2 additional face-to-face consultation days. And then with Diamond, you get all of the above, but you get 12 consultations days all up. So once a month, we're coming out and we're working with you with your consultation. And this depends on how much assistance do you need. Now, if you don't know anything about the training industry whatsoever, you need Diamond. If you know nothing, it's Diamond. If you know a little bit, you might have worked as a trainer assessor before, but you're not really sure about compliance, it's Ruby. So you go lower level. Gold is for those, you nailed it. You know exactly what you're doing. You've worked as a compliance manager. You've worked as an RTO manager. You understand the training industry. That's basically the different levels. If you know nothing, it's definitely a diamond that you need. Business planning and financial viability. Strategic business plan is included. We have the template for that. Projected profit and loss. Meeting with our RTO-CRICOS specialist accountant. Preparation of your application to be submitted to ASQA. Training and support on how to write your strategic business plan. And then you'll get those additional consultation days which you can use for writing your business plan. The training and assessment strategy will be drafted by the client liaison officer, who will identify the best training products for your scope of registration and identify your training needs, guide you through the industry consultation process, the resources and equipment that you need and where to go to buy all of that equipment, guiding you on how to write your staff matrix and what the requirements are of your trainer and assessor, assist you with the delivery and assessment plan and the writing of the assessment validation schedule and customized marketing material. You'll get included professional development through live workshops and webinars. You have for RTO, there's one webinar a month. For CRICOS, there's one webinar a month. If you're doing both RTO and CRICOS, it will be 2 webinars per month. And those webinars are delivered live and all of them are recorded. So you're able to access those recordings at a later time. And then we have live workshops. We deliver in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. So we have a range of workshops that you can access around Australia, and the webinars of course are live, so you can access them anywhere, just need a computer. We conduct a self-assessment, so the internal audit of your preparedness for submission to ASQA, and we'll conduct a final review of your training and assessment and completion and sign off of your self-assessment form to ASQA, and we'll provide you with guidance and an action plan on what you might need to rectify to ensure compliance before audit. We'll also submit your application through ASQAnet, and that includes all the required documentation. And we'll be by your side at your ASQA audit with a folder of documentation that you can use for the audit. We'll also take notes on the day of your audit, and we'll allow time. We'll also fix documents whilst we're with you, and coaching throughout the day and guidance on how to answer the auditor. Here are some of our previous clients that we've worked with. You'll see a lot of these are on our website too, and there are testimonials on our website with people that we've worked with before. Here's a training organisation that we're currently working with. He stayed on with us. He's just signed up as a member as well. This is Wiseman. So Wiseman owned and operated a restaurant and wanted to offer commercial cookery training. We assisted with CRICOS and vet registration, and we got him 100% compliant at his audit. We did make some adjustments at the audit, but we got him through. We assisted him with his 9B requirements as well through our referral services. And the client was approved within a month of the audit and is now a member of our organisation, and we're preparing him for his post-initial now. This is a training organisation that came to us who were going to lose a $2 million contract unless they became a registered training organisation. They needed to get the registration within 3 months, and we successfully achieved that. That was back in 2015 that we achieved that. This is a testimonial from one of our other clients, Aston College, where we assisted them with their initial registration, and we also assisted with their post-initial registration, and they have done membership as well. We're currently working with this organisation, Memento or Hospitality Institute. We did their initial registration for an RTO. We're now doing their CRICOS registration. We've done about 5 or 6 additions to scope for them now, and we're also preparing them for a post-initial audit. So you might be thinking, well, I'm too busy. Sounds really hard. I'm feeling very overwhelmed now, Angela. Thank you very much. I don't have the money. I think I could do this on my own. I'm not ready. Need to wait till I know a bit more. I feel I need to put this off. Well, maybe I need a bit more information. Well, you're either ready or you're not. If you're not ready, then you need to go and figure out what else you need to do. If you're ready, we're ready. We're able to get you started right now. The way I see it, it's a return on investment. How we assist you is what you're going to be doing to build a business that can be very, very successful. You'll have the ability to be able to access government funding. I sold my RTO over 10 years ago now for 500,000. It'd be worth way more than that now. It's worth a couple of million now, where it's positioned. It had a lot of government funding, so we did quite well in that area, and definitely it's expanded quite a bit from when I sold it. You could get access to the international market, and there's lots of opportunities to expand your business. So would you rather have a team of experts on your side with over 20 years of experience and over 200 successful audits sitting next to you when you're dealing with ASQA? If you did this on your own, you'd be paying an RTO manager around $120,000 to $200,000 per year. It could take you up to 3 years to gain your dream. You could go through this whole process and then risk being non-compliant at audit and having to spend more time and money. Or you buy an RTO and then you lose the registration because it's non-compliant. You lose valuable time and money, cause more stress due to not knowing what you are doing or hiring the wrong person to help you. So what we do that is very different. We are by your side at your ASQA audit. We include professional development throughout your time with us. You get the face-to-face training, you get the webinars, you get documentation that has been to over 200 ASQA audits. We include completion of your financial viability kit. Our team has experience within the RTO-CRICOS industry, working in the industry and as auditors, and we have connections with a range of resource providers we can refer you to. We do not add more fees following commencement. We are transparent with all of our fees up front. So there won't be another fee now for your business plan and another fee for your financial viability and another fee for us assisting you with writing documents. That's not what we do. We're clear and transparent upfront with what we do. So thank you very much for attending today's webinar. I hope you got a lot out of what we do and the state of the market and what you'll need to know about setting up as a training organisation. If you need more information, please contact Dave at vivacitycoaching.com.au. You can also ring 1300 729 455 Eastern Standard Time. We are available Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you can give us a call at any time between those hours. You can also email Dave at any time, day or night, and he'll get back to you with a quote if you would like a quote, or if you have any further questions. I also recommend that you go to our website, vivacitycoaching.com.au, and check out our events page. You might want to see me live at a workshop and learn more about me before you make a decision, which is a very big investment of setting up a training organisation, by coming to one of my workshops where you'll learn more about my understanding, my knowledge, my background, and what you need to know with setting up a training organisation. It's a very good way to identify, well, am I going to be ready for this? Do I know how to do this? And also identify, well, is Vivacity the right team for you? So check out our website. We've got workshops running every month in each state. So if you jump online on vivacitycoaching.com.au/events, you'll be able to see one of our events there and you'll be able to book in. Thank you very much for attending today. I look forward to catching up with you as a client, or possibly at any of the training conferences. I'll be speaking at the VELG conference this year, so you can see me on the VELG training website as one of their speakers at the conference. I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.